key to due diligence is understanding what you are acquiring, because when merging practices or indeed acquiring practices, you're acquiring a business. Now, businesses have been running for years, potentially. Some of them have been running for 50, 60 years. And over the course of that time, it has acquired both assets and liabilities and risks. So what you do in due diligence is to try and understand what that is. Due diligence typically relates to financial due diligence, understanding the accounts, what's in the accounts, and legal due diligence, so understanding what kind of legal risks might be out there. In a general practice, in a GP practice, often people say, well, there are no risks. There are possibly fewer than there are in many other businesses, but in reality there are risks and issues and liabilities out there, and you need to decide what you're going to do with them. If you're going to acquire another business or merge with another business, for peace of mind, you really want to understand what it is you're actually acquiring. That's essentially what due diligence is. So you would look through as much of it as you can yourself, and then try and understand, well, where are the bigger unknowns, where are the bigger risks? And those are the areas you probably want to get some help with to do your due diligence. And that typically in a general practice is the building, the employment contracts, possibly the GMS or PMS or APMS contract. Those are probably the main areas. In terms of performing due diligence, you may want to do it yourself, but also for the more difficult areas, it's probably a good idea to get some professional help, both from your accountant and from your solicitor. Now, why would you do that? That's partly to make sure you've understood the liabilities and the risks correctly, and secondly, to get documented what happens with those. You can do two things with those risks and liabilities. You can either leave them behind, or you can bring them with you into the business, but decide who is going to be responsible for those. So what that's called is warranties and indemnities. If, for example, you are worried about whether there are any problems with the building, you might ask for a warranty that there are that all the service charges have been paid on the lease, for example. Now, that warranty is a guarantee. And if the guarantee is not correct, then you can go back to the person who gave it and say, well, you need to now make good for that warranty. Warranties you use where there is a known risk. There's also the unknowns or the less known risks, and you can indemnify against those. So you might ask for an indemnity, for example, against an employment claim, which may be progressing or indeed may be about to be incurred by one of the practices. So that indemnity would say that the partners from the legacy practice will pick up all of the costs associated with that employment claim. And in that way you can merge with greater peace of mind. That's really the reason you undertake due diligence, is to give yourself that comfort that you understand who's paying for what. So of course, then does it make sense to document it? Absolutely, because you will want to rely on those warranties and indemnities if there is a problem later on. Due diligence is, of course, something you would do in any business and would be well advised to do so. The difference in healthcare is that it's just a specialist sector, so the things to look for are slightly different than in other industries. So some of the more specialist areas relate to the contract, the GMS, PMS, APMS contract, any breaches or issues with that. Also the funding, so are there any problems with the rent reimbursement? Any problems with the QOF funding, for example? Also problems with employment contracts. So many of the employment contracts will, for example, carry liabilities associated with NHS pensions or the NHS terms of service, which can be very onerous. And these are specialist areas which requires a specialist understanding in order to identify those risks.